2 stabbings on the subway this week. Now police say the same person is responsible for both attacks.
They're searching for this man here, identified as 52-year-old Jamar Banks. The NYPD says that he stabbed a 31-year-old man Wednesday on the 2 train at the 14th Street and 7th Avenue station. And then yesterday, police say he stabbed an off-duty MTA worker on the 5 train platform at the Pelham Parkway station. Both victims are in stable condition.
The heartbeat of New York City lies beneath its streets, a labyrinth of subway lines carrying millions daily. But what happens when this lifeline becomes a stage for fear? At the start of this year, the city was gripped by the chilling realization that danger had struck at its core. 2 days, 2 victims, 1 man responsible, a name that would come to symbolize chaos and unease: Jamar Banks. Imagine stepping onto a train, the familiar hum of the subway beneath your feet, a routine commute suddenly shattered by the sharp edge of violence. On January 1, a man was attacked on the No. 2 train in Manhattan, stabbed from behind in an act so sudden it left passengers frozen. The suspect slipped away into the city's vastness. Before the city could catch its breath, another attack. January 2, a subway platform in the Bronx. An argument escalating to bloodshed, leaving an off-duty MTA cleaner clinging to his life as the assailant disappeared once more. The victims survived, but the scars left behind stretched beyond their wounds. The city's confidence in its safety fractured. The perpetrator, a man with a staggering 87 prior arrests, now accused of carrying out these violent acts. Jamar Banks wasn't an unfamiliar name to law enforcement. His past was riddled with encounters with the system, a pattern of criminal activity, fleeting consequences, and a growing sense that something had gone terribly wrong. This story isn't just about the crimes, it's about a city forced to confront hard truths about its safety, a system buckling under its own weight, a population questioning, how did this happen? And yet, in the midst of the fear, there's another question that looms larger. What comes next? How does a city heal its cracks while ensuring that its people on every train and every station feel secure once again?
Kindly support us by subscribing to this channel. Hit the notification bell icon so you won't miss our latest video.
This is the story of Jamar Banks, the subway stabbings, and the battle to reclaim safety in a city that refuses to be brought to its knees. For weeks, New York City was on edge, its subway system haunted by the specter of Jamar Banks. His name, his face, his actions, it all lingered in the minds of commuters. But on a crisp January evening, that tension finally broke. It happened at the 219th Street subway station in the Bronx. Officers had been combing the city, studying his patterns, following every clue. This was not just an arrest. It was the culmination of relentless determination to bring a dangerous man to justice. Banks stood on the platform, a seemingly unremarkable figure in the flow of subway passengers. But to the officers who had spent days tracking him, he was anything but ordinary. With 87 prior arrests, Banks was a symbol of everything the city feared, a man whose history of violence and brushes with the law had made him infamous. When the officers moved in, it was swift and deliberate. They approached with caution, knowing his reputation for volatility. And there it was, the knife, the same weapon believed to have been used in the 2 subway stabbings that had left New Yorkers shaken. Its presence was undeniable proof of the danger he posed. As he was taken into custody, the weight of the moment was felt across the city. Commuters at the station paused, watching in a mix of relief and disbelief. Some stared in silence, others couldn't contain their anger. "When was he still out here?" one woman yelled as Banks was led away in handcuffs. For her, and for so many others, this arrest wasn't just about one man. It was about a system that had allowed him to slip through the cracks over and over again. Banks' disheveled appearance during his perp walk only added to the emotional intensity of the scene. News cameras captured every step, every glare, every shouted question from angry New Yorkers demanding answers. Was this truly justice, or was it just the aftermath of a system playing catch-up? For the victims of his attacks, this moment was deeply personal. The first, a man stabbed on the No. 2 train near 14th Street, still recovering in stable condition. The second, an off-duty MTA cleaner who had been attacked on a Bronx subway platform, likely struggling to make sense of a senseless act. And for the everyday commuter, the fear of what had happened still lingered. Banks had used the subway as his hunting ground, his routes on the No. 2 and No. 5 lines now infamous in the minds of those who rode them. What should have been safe, mundane, even boring, had become a source of terror. The arrest was a victory for law enforcement, but it was also a glaring reminder of a larger issue. Jamar Banks wasn't just a criminal. He was the result of a system stretched too thin, too willing to let someone like him slip back onto the streets. As news of the arrest spread, the city collectively exhaled. But the question remained, was this just one chapter of a larger story, or was it the beginning of something new, an era where public safety could finally be restored? The answer wasn't clear, but for now, one thing was certain. Jamar Banks was in custody, and the city, battered but unbroken, could begin to process what had happened. The people wanted accountability, answers, and most of all, a promise that something like this would never happen again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
This wasn't just about justice for the victims. It was about reclaiming the very soul of New York City, one arrest at a time. The story of Jamar Banks begins long before his arrest, but it's the 2 days at the start of this year that catapulted him into the public eye. 2 days, 2 violent attacks. Let's go back to where it all began. January 1, 2025. It was the first day of a new year, but for one commuter it would become a day marked by trauma. The No. 2 train was moving northbound, a seemingly ordinary journey through Manhattan. The car was full, yet quiet, just another day in the life of New Yorkers navigating their bustling city. Somewhere near 14th Street and 7th Avenue, that quiet was shattered. Witnesses recall seeing an argument break out between 2 men. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and before anyone could react, the confrontation took a violent turn. Jamar Banks, without warning, approached the other man from behind and plunged a knife into his back. The victim collapsed, stunned and bleeding, as chaos erupted in the subway car. Passengers scrambled to help while others backed away in fear. Amid the commotion, Banks seized his opportunity to flee. By the time the train pulled into the station, he was gone, vanished into the sprawling network of the city's transit system. The victim, a 31-year-old man, was rushed to the hospital in stable condition. But his life, like the lives of so many others, would never be the same. For him, and for everyone who witnessed the attack, the subway's space they'd once taken for granted now felt dangerous, even hostile. January 2, 2025. As the city tried to process the horror of the previous day, another act of violence struck. This time, it was early morning at the Pelham Bay station in the Bronx. An off-duty MTA cleaner was on the platform of the No. 5 train going about his morning, but once again, Jamar Banks was there. Accounts describe an argument, brief but heated, before the violence escalated. Banks attacked, stabbing the cleaner multiple times, first in the back, then in the armpit. The platform turned into a scene of panic. People shouted for help, some froze in fear, unsure of what to do, and just as he had the day before, Banks slipped away, disappearing into the maze of subway tunnels before anyone could stop him. The victim survived, but like the first, he was left scarred, not just by the physical injuries, but by the sheer randomness of the attack. For both men, life had been upended in a way they could never have anticipated. And for the millions of others who rely on the subway every day, these attacks struck a chord of fear that was impossible to ignore. The public's reaction was swift and visceral. Social media exploded with outrage and concern. News stations covered the attacks with an intensity that reflected the city's anxiety. Commuters began questioning their own safety, wondering if they too could be at risk. "It's terrifying to take the subway," one NYU student told reporters. "How are we supposed to feel safe when something like this can happen out of nowhere?" The subway, long seen as the lifeblood of New York City, now felt like a place of vulnerability. Fear rippled through the community as people demanded answers and action. How could such violence happen, not once but twice, in less than 48 hours? And how could someone with such a lengthy criminal record still be on the streets, free to inflict harm? The timeline of these attacks reveals more than just moments of brutality. It exposes cracks in a system that allowed them to happen. For the victims, for the witnesses, and for the city at large, the emotional toll was heavy. Each attack was a reminder of how fragile safety can feel in the face of violence. As the investigation intensified, so did the pressure to capture Jamar Banks, but for now the city was left to grapple with the fear and uncertainty that these 2 days had unleashed. 2 attacks, 2 victims, and a city shaken to its core. And yet the story was far from over. To understand the gravity of the attacks and the fear they ignited, one must examine the man at the center of it all, Jamar Banks. His criminal history is not just a part of this story, it is the foundation of a larger conversation about public safety, accountability, and the justice system's repeated failures. Jamar Banks' name is no stranger to police records. Over the course of decades, his actions have left a trail of destruction and frustration. 87 arrests. Let that number sink in. 87 times he entered the system. 87 times the system had an opportunity to address the threat he posed. Banks' record reads like a catalog of crimes. Each charge paints a picture of a man with a pattern of escalating violence. Among his offenses are acts that should have kept him behind bars far longer. Yet somehow, time after time, he was released. One particularly telling chapter came in November 2024. Banks was arrested twice in the span of a single month for petty theft. Both times he was released with nothing more than a summons. To some it may have seemed like minor crimes, but in hindsight these moments represented missed opportunities, chances to intervene before the violence escalated. Authorities were well aware of the threat Banks posed. His reputation for volatility and his habit of carrying a weapon made him a dangerous figure, especially in the confined and crowded spaces of New York City's subway system. Officers were warned to exercise extreme caution when approaching him, knowing full well the risk he carried. Yet, despite the known dangers, Banks continued to roam free. His ability to evade long-term consequences wasn't just a failure of enforcement, it was a systemic flaw that left the public vulnerable. This raises uncomfortable questions. How does someone with such a lengthy and violent history remain a threat to public safety? How does the justice system, designed to protect, allow individuals like Banks to slip through its cracks over and over again? Critics have pointed to gaps in the way repeat offenders are handled. They argue that leniency for minor crimes can sometimes snowball into larger risks, especially when those minor offenses are part of a broader pattern. For someone like Banks, each release was a chance to continue his cycle of harm, unchecked and unmonitored. Banks is not an isolated case. He represents a much larger problem. His story forces us to confront the reality that public safety is only as strong as the systems designed to uphold it, and when those systems falter, it is everyday citizens who pay the price. The attacks on January 1 and 2 were not just acts of violence. They were the culmination of decades of missed opportunities to stop a man who had proven time and again that he was a danger to those around him. As Jamar Banks sits in custody, his story serves as a reminder that addressing crime is not just about reacting to the worst moments, it's about preventing them before they happen. And for New York City, the question now is, what lessons will be learned from this, and will they be enough to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself? The arrest of Jamar Banks brought a sense of relief to New York City, but it did little to ease the growing fear and frustration among its residents. For commuters, the attacks were not just isolated incidents. They were a wake-up call that revealed the vulnerabilities of the city's transit system and the challenges of keeping it safe. On the streets of Manhattan, voices of concern were loud and clear. Alina Goldfein, an NYU student, expressed what so many others were feeling. "It's terrifying to take the subway," she said. "I've been riding these trains my whole life, but now I can't help but look over my shoulder. This isn't the New York I grew up in." Goldfein's words struck a chord with commuters across the city. People shared their own stories, close calls, unsettling encounters, and the growing anxiety they felt every time they stepped onto a subway platform. One man recounted seeing Banks' face in news reports and realizing he'd been on the same train as the suspect just days before the attacks. "It's chilling," he said. "You don't think it could happen to you until it almost does." Another commuter, a mother of two, voiced her frustration. "We're told to rely on the subway, but how can we feel safe when people like this are out there? Where's the protection? Where's the accountability?" The fear wasn't confined to those directly affected. Social media became a flood of personal stories and calls for change. Hashtags like Safe Subways and NYC Public Safety began trending, with thousands of users demanding immediate action. Polls conducted by local news outlets reflected the mounting concern. A significant majority of respondents said they felt less safe on the subway compared to previous years, and nearly everyone agreed that more needed to be done to protect commuters. But alongside the fear, there was anger. Anger at a system that seemed to have failed its people. How does someone like Jamar Banks, with his record, still have the opportunity to do this? One witness asked reporters. "This isn't just about one man, it's about how we got here in the first place." The calls for action were loud and urgent. New Yorkers demanded more than just a reactive approach. They wanted systemic changes to address the root causes of subway violence. Mental health became a central focus of the conversation. Many pointed out that Banks' history of mental illness was a critical factor that had been overlooked for far too long. One commuter put it bluntly, "We're treating symptoms, not the disease. This isn't just about locking people up, it's about making sure they get the help they need before it gets to this point." Beyond mental health, there was a clear push for tangible safety measures. Increased police presence on platforms and trains, better lighting in stations, and the installation of platform edge barriers were among the most common suggestions. Governor Kathy Hochul's announcement of new safety initiatives was met with cautious optimism, but many wondered if it would be enough. "More officers are great, but we need long-term solutions," said a local activist. "We can't just keep reacting to the next tragedy. We need to rebuild trust in this system." As the dust settled from Banks' arrest, one thing was clear: this wasn't just a moment for reflection, it was a moment for action. New Yorkers were tired of feeling unsafe in their own city, and they weren't afraid to make their voices heard. The public outcry was more than just noise. It was a demand for accountability, for change, and for a city that felt safe again. But whether those demands would lead to lasting reform remained to be seen. For now, the people of New York were united in their message: enough is enough. The fear and frustration of New Yorkers didn't go unheard. In the aftermath of the subway stabbings and the public outcry that followed, Governor Kathy Hochul announced an ambitious safety plan to restore confidence in the city's transit system. For many, this plan represents a critical step toward addressing the vulnerabilities laid bare by the attacks. At the heart of the initiative is a significant increase in police presence across the subway network. The governor pledged to deploy 750 additional NYPD officers to patrol stations and trains. The goal? To create a visible deterrent to crime and offer reassurance to riders who have grown wary of their daily commutes. These officers won't just be stationed at entrances or platforms, they'll be riding alongside commuters, ensuring their presence is felt where it matters most. And it doesn't stop there. From 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., every single subway train will have at least one uniformed officer on board for the next 6 months. This targeted approach recognizes the heightened vulnerability of late-night commuters and aims to bring peace of mind to those traveling during these hours. For many New Yorkers, the presence of an officer on their train could mean the difference between a ride filled with tension and one where they feel truly safe. But safety isn't just about policing. Governor Hochul's plan also addresses the physical infrastructure of the subway system, focusing on upgrades designed to prevent accidents and deter crime. One of the most significant changes is the installation of platform edge barriers at over 100 stations by the end of 2025. These barriers serve a dual purpose. They protect passengers from accidental falls or being pushed onto the tracks and make it harder for potential criminals to use the platform as a stage for violence. Additionally, enhanced LED lighting will be rolled out across the subway network. Brighter, more focused lighting in stations and on platforms will improve visibility and reduce the dark corners where trouble often hides. These upgrades are simple yet effective measures to create an environment where crime feels less likely to thrive. The projections for these initiatives are promising. Experts believe that the increased police presence, combined with infrastructure improvements, could lead to a substantial reduction in subway crime. Public safety advocates are optimistic that these changes will also address the psychological toll that recent events have taken on commuters. Feeling safe isn't just about statistics, it's about restoring trust and ensuring that every New Yorker can step onto a subway train without fear. However, the success of these measures depends on more than just implementation. It requires sustained commitment. Critics have pointed out that while these efforts are a strong start, they need to be paired with long-term strategies to address the root causes of violence, including mental health support and a justice system that holds repeat offenders accountable. For now, Governor Hochul's plan has given New Yorkers a reason to hope. It's a promise that the city is listening, that it's taking action, and that it's committed to making the subway system a place of connection rather than fear. Whether this promise will be fulfilled remains to be seen, but for the millions who depend on the subway every day, it's a step in the right direction and a chance to reclaim their city, one train at a time. The subway stabbings were more than isolated tragedies. They were a stark reflection of the challenges New York City faces in its ongoing battle against crime. To understand their significance, it's important to look at the bigger picture, how crime is trending across the city, and what these trends reveal about the systems meant to keep people safe. In 2024, the NYPD reported a 3% reduction in overall crime compared to the previous year, a statistic that on the surface appears to mark progress, but within that decrease lies a troubling counterpoint. Felony assaults rose by nearly 5%. Behind these numbers are real people, real injuries, and a growing concern that even as some areas improve, others are worsening. Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch acknowledged the mixed reality these figures present. "We've made strides," she said, "but we're not where we need to be. Reducing crime isn't just about numbers, it's about making sure New Yorkers feel safe in their neighborhoods, on their streets, and in their daily lives." Her words underscore the city's dual challenge, fighting crime while rebuilding the public's trust in its safety. At the heart of this challenge is a problem that loomed large in the case of Jamar Banks, the intersection of mental health and the justice system. Banks's history of mental illness was no secret. It was a recurring theme in his decades-long pattern of criminal activity, a backdrop to his 87 arrests. Yet despite this knowledge, meaningful intervention seemed elusive. The justice system, critics argue, is ill-equipped to manage individuals like Banks, people whose actions are driven by untreated mental health issues. Instead of receiving the care and support they need, they cycle in and out of the system, their behavior escalating with each missed opportunity for help. This isn't just a failure of one part of the system, it's a failure of the system as a whole. Law enforcement, mental health services, and the courts often operate in silos, unable or unwilling to coordinate effectively. The result? People like Jamar Banks slip through the cracks, and the public pays the price. The implications of this failure are far-reaching. It's not just about preventing the next attack, it's about rethinking how the city approaches safety and accountability. What does justice look like for someone who is both a danger to others and a victim of their own circumstances? How can mental health be prioritized in a way that prevents violence before it happens? Advocates for reform point to integrated approaches as a potential solution. Programs that combine law enforcement with mental health professionals have shown promise in other cities, offering a model that treats mental health issues as a public safety priority rather than an afterthought. But these programs require funding, commitment, and a shift in how the city views its responsibilities to both its citizens and those struggling within its systems. But as New York grapples with these questions, one thing is clear: the challenges are bigger than any single incident. The subway stabbings may have been the flashpoint, but the issues they highlight, rising violence, systemic gaps, and the struggle to balance safety with compassion, are ones that will take years to address. The story of crime in New York City isn't just about statistics or headlines. It's about the lives behind those numbers, the victims, the perpetrators, and the millions of people who live with the consequences of a system in need of reform. For now, the city moves forward, step by step, train by train, toward a future it hopes will be safer and more just for everyone. The arrest of Jamar Banks wasn't just the end of a manhunt, it was the beginning of a conversation New York City could no longer avoid. We traced his actions. 2 violent subway attacks in the span of 2 days, leaving victims scarred and a city shaken. We examined his criminal history, a record so extensive it begged the question, how was he still free to commit these crimes? And we explored the public reaction, fear, frustration, and a cry for answers that echoed across every borough. Governor Hochul's safety measures signal progress: more officers on trains, improved station infrastructure, and an acknowledgement that safety isn't optional, it's essential. But the deeper questions remain. How do we fix a system that allows someone like Banks to slip through the cracks? How do we address mental health not as an afterthought, but as a cornerstone of public safety? This story isn't just about New York, it's about every city grappling with crime, mental health crises, and the delicate balance of safety and accountability. It's about us, commuters, neighbors, citizens, demanding more from the systems meant to protect us. So now we turn to you. What do you think? Are these new measures enough to make you feel safe? Have you ever felt the weight of insecurity while riding public transit or walking through your city? Share your experiences in the comments. Your voice matters. Your story matters. And let's not stop there. Change happens when communities come together. Support mental health initiatives. Advocate for policies that prioritize both safety and humanity. Hold leaders accountable for promises made, and never stop asking the tough question. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Together we can turn fear into action, questions into solutions, and headlines into hope. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and keep pushing for a better tomorrow.